This week on Influence, why this wildly successful podcaster can never show his face on the internet. It's not me. It's my guest. My face is here. Hello, you beautiful listeners and beautiful viewers. I cannot see you, I cannot hear you, but I know, I can tell in my heart that you are all beautiful in your own way. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Welcome to Influence. It's a podcast about internet creativity and communities. I'm your host, Matt Silverman, wishing many internets upon you and yours and your loved ones. If you're new to this show, welcome. I have been covering technology and internet communities for... I had to go back. I had to look it up. It's a little upsetting. 15 years-ish, give or take, in various forms. And over the course of that professional work, I've become obsessed with the people, the individuals, the teams, the small businesses who turned their thing, their passion, their fandom, their community into something, a larger community, a job, a business, a social movement, and as we all know, in 2024, some of these people command audiences and communities that are larger than traditional media. We're talking like bigger than the Super Bowl, okay, in some cases, and yet the economics of the internet are still maturing. They're still catching up, especially when the social web is constantly shifting under our feet every year, every week, it seems. So how do we reconcile that? That is what the show is about. And I know that my guest today has a lot to say on these topics. He is the creator and the host, two things, okay, maybe more, we'll find out, of the wildly popular podcast Darknet Diaries, which he dubs True Stories from the Dark Side of the Internet. And I dub it something else, but I'm going to tell him that in a second. He interviews and tells like mind-blowing stories about hackers, cyber criminals, like legit criminals, like, hey, they were in prison and now we're talking. Bank robbers, crypto scammers, spies. And I'm not talking about James Bond. I'm talking about real like spies for governments. Crazy shit. He's interviewed CIA agents and penetration testers. If you don't know what that is, we'll cover that. Those are some of my favorite episodes. Jack Rhysider, welcome to Influence.
Hi. Thanks for having me on.
How you doing?
Super.
I have many questions for you. I'm going to put maybe two little disclosures up front. One, Jack and I have a working relationship. We work together a little bit. I help out with his YouTube channel, so he's not a stranger off the street. We have that dynamic already. And if you're watching the video version of this on YouTube, which you can get at youtube.com/@influencepodcast. You may notice that you're not seeing Jack's face. He remains anonymous when he speaks publicly, and I'm going to ask him about that. But first, my first question for you, Jack. When people ask you what you do for a living, how do you explain it to people?
Gosh, why do you guys ask me the hardest question first?
Isn't that the hardest thing?
I never can get it right because my personal life is different than my public life, right? And I keep that separate. So
yep.
Is a personal person asking, someone at the coffee shop?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Okay, so you go about your life in the coffee shop, your family members, whatever, and there's, well, okay.
They don't know I'm a podcaster, right? So I don't tell them because I like to podcast anonymously.
Okay.
So I just
do you have a cover story?
Yeah.
Like, well, hey, what do you do? And you're like, I work at Starbucks. Like, what do you say?
Yeah, I just say I'm in tech or I'm a writer or something like that, a tech writer.
Okay.
And I kind of wish I had like a blog that I could just show them like, yeah, this is the blog I'm working on. And,
right,
and
some
just
sort
leave
of
it
fake
at that.
blog.
Because then
Love
at least it's my interest and we can bond over that if you're interested, right?
Totally.
But it's not quite connected to what I do.
Okay.
So yeah, I usually go there. The other side is if, I'm Jack at a conference or something and people are asking me, I just say I think there's three hats that I wear. It's storyteller, journalist, and technology something, teacher, educator, something there.
I'm going to ask you about this a little bit later, but you've also, I would throw another hat on you as there's parts of your show where you take off the journalist hat and then you briefly put on the activism hat. I don't know if you agree with that, but you often are like, hey, this shit's crazy what we just covered, and it needs to be fixed, and people, governments and companies need to step up. Do you agree with that? Do you feel like you're an advocate?
I don't really see, there's a few things that I get angry about, but I don't really see myself as an activist. I think
An
it's
activist.
more, I want to highlight a specific thing that I want you to just pay attention to and not really give you any action to do. Right. So, one of the videos I published recently was a very big privacy advocacy video, right? So digital privacy is important to me, and I put like an 11-minute video out just ranting about it. I tried to be as powerful as I could, but in there I gave no call to action of like, here's what you should be doing, here's how to fix it, or all that. I just wanted you to get angry about it as well.
And what's your goal? Is that just education? Like, you should be angry too because look at this craziness.
Yeah, like let's. I think it's harder, and I think I do. So just back to my podcast, Darknet Diaries, for a minute. I think I'm less trying to get people, like, I don't want to be a teacher in the sense of like, okay, here's how to configure a switch, a network device, or how to secure your firewall or computer. Because I think that's I don't know. I think there's a lot of that going on. It's kind of easy to find that how-to stuff. I like to go a step earlier and get you motivated to want to do that, to be interested in that. Why is that? There's a lot of people that listen that aren't interested in that at all. And they listen, and now they're like, I want to go make a firewall. I want to go secure a router. Or I want to do something. And just that, I think that motivation to just go get something is a big thing that I'm focusing on. I think that's the harder thing to move, is get people excited about something compared to, hey, you already excited about something? Okay, I'll teach you this.
Yes.
And I just think there's a lot of teachers out there. So I'm not quite trying to teach people because they've already wanting to learn, but I'm trying to get them excited about something in the world.
I didn't know I needed to care about X, but now that I know about it, oh my God, I'm obsessed with learning more and finding more information.
Yeah, and I think when I get excited about something, they're looking at me as like, well, this is a guy that is deeply knowledgeable about something. He's excited about it. Clearly, there's something here that I should be paying attention to more. And so I kind of use myself in that way to get people pumped up about something.
Bonus question on sort of explaining what you do, and now we've identified different camps. Are there must be, or maybe not, you tell me, are there people close to you, like family members, who do know what you're doing, and how do you explain it to them? I think you had your dad on the show in one episode.
My
and
dad
so what is that like?
Yeah, it's I mean, my dad doesn't understand anything. He wants me to get a real job, but yeah, I think it's interesting when that the people who do know both sides, they find, so I'll back it up a second, right? So when I was first making the show, I said I wasn't sure, is this going to be something I should do or not? So I sent it to 10 friends, and I said, what do you think? 3 of them replied. So 7 of my favorite friends, my family and friends, were just like, I'm not listening to this crap.
But hold on, before you go on, were these friends in like tech and InfoSec, or were they just normal people? Not just.
A lot of them were normal people. Some were
regular people.
So they were either into tech or podcast fans. So I was like, okay. You're
Great.
One or the other will work. And yeah, it's just 7 of them didn't. And so I just think that it's kind of fascinating. That's really difficult even to get your friends and family to care about some of the work you do.
It is, because you're so hyper focused on this thing that you're upset. This is what the internet is for, and this is what the show is about and has been for some time. It's like, nobody around me, my family, my neighbors, my regular friends, cares about the things that I'm obsessed with. So where am I going to go? Got to go on Reddit, got to go on Discord, got to go on Instagram, or whatever it is. So I get that.
And I like that it's not there for everyone in the world, but it is there for a specific group of people. And then those people, like, there's enough people in the world to be able to have a solid momentum and stuff. And I always say, well, where's there enough people? And I think if there is like a subreddit dedicated to something, knitting, quilting, underwater
Mm-hmm.
scuba diving, whatever the case is, or if there is a conference dedicated to something, then there's a huge amount of people that are also really interested in this topic.
Yes.
And anything like a podcast, a blog, a YouTube channel, or something will work really well to cater to that. Even if it is niche, it seems like a smaller community, a niche community, or whatever. If there's a conference or a or a subreddit involved with it, then I think that that's quite a big enough audience to make it sustainable for you to be like just a full-time creator for them.
Yep. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I was saying to a friend recently that I'm starting to observe, usually when I get obsessed with a video game, I'm like, oh, I got to go to the subreddit. And it's a small indie game. The subreddit has like 400 people, but the Discord has 10,000. I'm like, oh, Discord is coming for
there you go. Yeah,
Reddit
Discord too.
right now. You know what I mean? So anyway, I find that fascinating. I want to play a clip of one of your episodes for listeners and viewers who may not be familiar. Maybe people are listening for longtime listeners, or maybe people are love your show and they're listening to this for that reason. But this is a clip from an episode called Shadow Brokers, which is about hackers who stole some malware that the NSA uses to spy on people and then posted it publicly on the internet and started selling it to other hackers. So there's a little clip from the episode called Shadow Brokers, and it's one of Jack's all of Jack's episodes are great, but like there's some that really pop, and this is one of them. So here's a little clip.
Now, in the early morning of August 13th, 2016, one of the people in the SOC saw something on that Twitter feed, and they knew they needed to tell Jake.
Maybe 6:30 or 7 in the morning, something like that. And I remember we were just rolling out, if I remember correctly, I think to Sonic for breakfast, right? And grabbing some of those breakfast burritos they have.
The tweet that Jake read was posted by someone with the name Shadow Brokers with 2 S's at the end. The tweet said, quote, "We follow Equation Group traffic. We find Equation Group source range. We hack Equation Group. We find many Equation Group cyber weapons. You see picture. We give you some Equation Group files free. You see, this is good proof. No, you enjoy. You break many things. You find many intrusions. You write many bad words, but not all. We are auction the best files." End quote. That is hard to understand. Sounds like whoever wrote that, English was not their first language, but it basically said this group, Shadow Brokers, have stolen some cyber weapons from the NSA, specifically Tau within the NSA, which is what Equation Group is, and that they're giving away one of these exploits for free to everyone now and auctioning the rest off. So the rendition SOC saw this, thought it was important.
We got alerted from one of them and said, hey, how are you seeing this? And up to that point, the answer was no, we haven't seen this. And so then we're popping up on Twitter and going out to GitHub and saying, okay, hey, first it was the download the stuff from GitHub, and then it was oh snap, this is real, right? This isn't a hoax. This is real stuff.
So even though Jake is the president of Rendition Security, and even though he was on a client site at the time, he felt this was so important that he took time out of his day to download these files and to look at this malware that the Shadow Brokers had released.
Some of your episodes are about huge topics, nation states spying on each other, massive bank robberies, and some are about individuals who are doing hacking or penetration testing and such. So my broad question is, what do you look for? What you're reading, you're watching, you're absorbing all this stuff from the internet, and what makes you sit up and say, ooh, I got to look into this?
Yeah, I think the world of cybersecurity and hacking is so wide. So there's a lot of really interesting things that I don't know. I always listen to myself of like, what am I interested in? Right. Mm-hmm. So I go after that. And there's a lot of people who complain like, I'm not interested in this story. And I'm like, I don't care. I am. So I want to keep going after what I'm interested in, because if I have that excitement that, wow, this is a story I am excited to get into, then that I think comes through in the episode in a great way. If I'm just doing stories for the audience and I don't really find interest in it or whatever, then that's going to fall flat, I think. So I always have to go after my passion.
Yep.
But I really love these big stories of nation state hackers and CIA agents, whatever the case is. But I also feel like I go to these security conferences and stuff, and I feel like they're ignoring maybe the teenage hacker or the people who are smashing windows. And it's like, well, there's this very big security hole of a window. Like, why aren't anybody is here in this whole conference solving how to fix a window? Like, it's so easy to throw a rock through it. What's going on here? And so I feel like I love calling that out, because I think it's just there's just not good fixes for some of the stuff. Anyway, the thing I'm looking for the most is twists and turns in a story. I love when a story, like if story crafting in my head is always coming through in every article I read, where if we're headed in one direction, it has to take a hard 90-degree turn or 180-degree turn and go into another direction.
Right.
So, in this case, we had Jake trying to go on site to a client site and fix something, but a single tweet made him totally change his whole day, his whole week, his whole year, and he had to like cancel his plans and go and do something else, and everything's changed, right? And so I love this, like, okay, we're building up in this direction, and then it just doesn't end up in the way we want. And so the stories just have to have all these twists and turns, and that's what makes it exciting and what keeps you levitating and can't wait to hear what's next and all this sort of thing. And I think that is important for a good storytelling.
You must have many leads and ideas that are like, oh, this looks good. And then you're like, oh, it did. There's no twist. It didn't pan out. And I did all this work. And, I imagine that's probably, there's things on the cutting room floor that we may never hear from what you've been researching.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that, so I think all breaking news is like that, right? So, there's this latest hack, I think some video game got hacked recently, and they're like, oh, Jack, you should go do that story. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but I don't know who did it, and we don't have the reason or how they did it or anything like that. So we have more questions than answers, right?
Right.
And so if I did that story, it would be a 5-minute story. I've got I want to do an hour-long story. I want to hear, who is this person? How'd they get access to this? What's their motive? I want to get in their brain. I want to have every single question answered before getting into it. So another thing I'm looking for is, is the full story done? Is it soup to nuts?
Right.
We know the beginning, we know the middle, we know the end. And if we don't have it all, then I might wait 2 years and come back and check it out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Most of your episodes are about, hey, in 2017, this happened, and we're going to talk to the FBI guy, and we're going to talk to the hacker, and we're going to talk to a journalist, and that's fleshing out that story. So
yeah, and I think in my sense, I love this slow news kind of thing where wait till it's all here and then deliver it to me, because if you're giving me breaking news, you don't know what you're talking about. Totally. You're just making stuff up, and now you're referencing like old things that don't even have anything to do with this article.
As a person who came up in media companies and in newsrooms but never did news, I would observe my colleagues who are brilliant busting their ass to chase news, and then like in 20 minutes it's like, well, that's over and no one cares about that anymore because it's a blip and it's incomplete, and only later, as you're saying, do we really have the story. News and journalism is obviously critically important, but it felt like a treadmill that I never was interested in getting on. I wanted to make durable things the way you certainly do.
Yeah, and I don't like how certain things are so speculative, and some breaking news isn't even accurate. I really I think the opposite of what I ever want to do is conspiracy theories, right? So if that's my opposite, then I want to make sure that what I'm talking about is fact and accurate and properly checked and ethically sourced, and then present that to you. And it's really hard to do that when there's just so many unknowns as well. So I really need to get to the bottom of it before I can start yapping on about it.
Yep. So you are an excellent storyteller, and I think your fans and audience would agree. But what were you doing before you became a storyteller? If you're able to share, like, what was your profession or your education? Did you work in InfoSec?
Yeah, it was. I got a degree in computer engineering, and then fiddled around with not doing much in that, and then eventually got a job in doing network technology, just networking, right? So I was looking at routers and switches and firewalls. And
for companies or for like homes?
Yeah, for a Fortune 500 company. And that gave me a lot of we were managing networks for other companies too, right? So that gave me a lot of exposure to tons of environments and customers and clients and everything you can imagine. And then from there, they're like, hey, we've got this security engineering position open. Do you want to apply? And I said, heck yeah. I just love the word engineer. Just give me if anything engineer, I'll take. So I went for it. And it was just the perfect place because security kind of is this Jeopardy game of, here's a question that you might have heard when you were 6. And now we have to solve it today. And it's like critically important that you know anything about this at all. And you're like, yes, actually, when I was 6, I had a VCR that I had to repair. And I know exactly how to work this out or something, right? So it's just one of those really obscure worlds of everything technology converges into security. So I was a security engineer and I loved it because it just really, it picked my brain, and like every corner of the internet and every corner of technology was coming out every day in the weirdest ways. And so it kind of seems to like the pinnacle of technology to, well, it's like the center crossroad. It's not the pinnacle.
Right.
It's just like everything comes into security here. To secure it, I need to know networking. I need to know programming. I need to know system administration, right? It's just everything just comes together. And so that's what I did for 10 years. And then from there, I think I had a New Year's resolution that I was like, I want to teach more people more things. And what it was is, you know, the only people who knew I was good at what I was doing were my coworkers and my customers. And I thought, well, what if I ever want to get a different job or whatever? So I started a blog, and I was blogging for 7 years before I started my podcast. And the blog is just really notes to myself on, hey, if you had this bug before or system crash before, here's what you did to fix it. And so I was like, okay, cool. Because at 2:00 in the morning when you're on call and you got to fix something, you're like, what did I do last time? I have no idea what the command was. And so I just take notes to myself, and then I'd look at my blog. And so this blog started taking its own shape, right? It was, now I'm explaining complex topics as simple as I can. I'm trying to put things into basic terminology.
Was it anonymous?
Problems.
Did you have like a pen name username? Okay. It was your professional.
No, it was as Jack.
Okay.
And then, that, you know, that just kept going. So I was making content, and I was like, well, maybe I can make a cheat sheet or a video explaining these things, right? So kind of my creator journey started there. And then after about 7 years of that, I decided, okay, let's see if I can make a podcast, which was a whole nother story.
Well, so getting to that, when you started the podcast, did you envision it like, hey, InfoSec and IT people, this is for me and my crew, I don't know if anyone else is going to care? Or did you envision it as a thing that mainstream audiences would care about in the very beginning?
You know, I think, you know, a lot of people are asking me to pick a side. They're like, is this for the geeks or is this for the layperson? And I said, I don't know. Let's just not decide. I think what I like
today, it's for everyone, in my humble opinion. But I'm curious, when you started, what did you think?
So what I visioned was like, I liked This American Life. I liked 99% Invisible, Radiolab, that sort of thing. But I wanted it to be just super techy and geeky. Let's get into cybersecurity and hacking, but with this high production value and this strong storytelling stuff. Because those stories, they sometimes would just like captivate me with a hat or a suitcase or something, and I'm like, how am I glued to this story over a suitcase?
Something that you have no interest in and would never seek out, and now you're in your driveway listening to it. And I'm so glad you said that, because when I recommend your show to other people, especially lay people or podcast listeners, but they're definitely not techie InfoSec people, I call it This American Life for Hackers. And I wondered if you would, you know, take umbrage at that, but clearly, Ira Glass is an influence for you.
Yeah, Ira Glass is a strong influencer. I actually met him when I just started up my show and asked him some key questions at the time, right? So it was like, I actually tried to use his voice and write like him and all, like put everything into my show that's exactly the way he would do it, not to copy specifically, but just to kind of get that viewpoint of how does he think through things? How does he get stuff? So, you know, I might start the show like he starts the show, hey, it's Ira Glass, it's American Life. And so I'd start I'd do the same thing.
You should go on Cameo and make Ira Glass videos, because your voice is close enough. You know, that's a great impression. I love that.
Well, I would do the same thing. I'd be like, hey, it's Jack Rhysider. This is Darknet Diaries. Long time ago when I was 14, and so I would do exactly the same just to get and use the same music and everything. And I did that for like just influence after influence. I did the same thing about Jad Abumrad on Radiolab, and I did the same thing with as the way Malcolm Gladwell would speak or write or do sound design, and even the rest of the story with Paul Harvey. I'd listen to old like radio shows because this guy was also an influencer to me, and be like, how does he write these really amazing endings to his show? And how does he tell you this whole story without telling you who this is about? It's a crazy, it's a crazy way of storytelling. And even Rod Sterling on the Twilight Zone, like he's getting into some dark stuff, and it's intriguing. And what's the intriguing part here? And how?
Well, talk about twists. Like that was the ultimate twist modality for television. That I think that I'm not a super fan, but it changed television in a suspenseful twist plot storytelling
right.
kind of way, for sure.
So I had zero storytelling experience or journalism experience or presentation experience before doing this. And then as I was getting into it, I was like, okay, this is going to be the key crucial point of whether this goes or doesn't go. And so I was really hyper focused on what are all the storytelling tricks that these masters are using, and then like literally trying to write my story word for word the way they would. Yep. And after doing that 20 different times with 20 different voices and stuff, I eventually developed my own style.
Which is the way creativity happens. You mimic and you copy until you identify your own thing. So it's perfectly leads me to my next question, which is like, was there a moment or a specific episode when you really realized you were like, oh, this actually could be a thing?
What do you mean a thing? It is a thing.
But I mean, like, it could be a thing that thousands and millions of people would listen to. It could be a thing that makes money. It could be a job for me.
There's inflection points, right? So like, wow, there's something happening here. So the first, there's many, I think, inflection points. The first one was, I think I released 4 episodes at the beginning, right? So day one, here's 4 episodes, get started on this. And I did it at a conference. So I was going to go to a conference and then release it there and like give everyone stickers and stuff, whatever the case is. And upon arriving at the conference, I met someone who's like, oh, I listened to all 4 on the way here. And I'm like, how did you even find this? This is insane. And they're like, I can't wait for you to have more. Right. And so like that first weekend, the word had spread already, not far. Right. But it at least was
to key people who would care. They're aware of it.
Holy cow. Like that first, so basically the very first stranger to ever just say, I love your show is a thing that just puts so much wind under your wings to be like,
for sure.
Holy cow. It's not just my friends and family that like this. There's someone who has no skin in the game of whether my ego is stroked or not is saying good things about it. This is important to me. I gotta like if that one person likes it, then I'm sure that there'll be many people. And that gave me just so much energy. The next inflection point was, I think maybe a year or 2 later, I wasn't accepting, Patreon or any donations. I didn't have any ads or anything. And at a conference, somebody put $20 in my hand and said, your show means so much to me. I need you to have anything, a gift, appreciation. Here, take this $20.
Wow.
And they just put $20 in my hand. And I was, so flabbergasted by this of like, wow, this means a lot to someone, this much to someone. And I don't know, I think that first time someone gives you something on Patreon or any gift or something, appreciation is just, besides just a nice, comment or tweet or whatever, it is really just, it sticks with you. So that was that thing.
You had a Patreon IRL moment where someone was like, hey, this is so important to me that I often say like, hey, people are giving you the cost of a Netflix subscription. You could pay for Netflix and get 50,000 movies, or you could pay for this one show because it's so meaningful. And that is like monumental for a creator.
And the thing is that when you see the person, you look at them in the eye and you notice who they are as just a listener. It just wasn't somebody who I would ever thought would have given me $20. Like it was like a punk with like spiked hair, and it was just like, who is this? It was this crazy. And I think he was, just party animal and all this kind of stuff. And just like,
it was not
he
the
didn't
nerdy
look
IT
like he
guy.
slows down to listen to podcasts. Like I would never think that this guy's just like, oh, dude, I love this podcast. He just looks like he's just wild in the world. And I think the third inflection point was the first time I saw someone get a tattoo with some of the show artwork, right?
Whoa.
And that to me really means like there's something just about my identity about this show. I connect in such a strong way here that I want to put this permanently on my body because it's changed my life in such a massive way.
Yep.
And so I think I've seen 3 tattoos now.
Okay. Do you want to shout out your artist? Because your show has an iconic visual look. And is it the same artist who works on it all the time? Or do you have a team now? How does that all work?
I've gone through various artists over the years. That first one, the first tattoo, I can't remember the artist's name, but most of the time I use Odi Bagas as my artist, just someone I found on 99 Designs. The art, all the concept art is done by me. So I'll just basically I'll look through Pinterest for hours until I find something that I can mash up 2 ideas together, or it gives me some idea, and then I'll sketch it out, or I'll just like sketch it out as basic as I can, and then I'll give it to the artist and Odi Bagas, and then he'll make it look great.
Cool.
So it is a collaboration attempt every time.
Yep. When you mentioned your initial plan was going to this conference or multiple conferences and kind of just saying like, hey, these are the people who would care about this. Check out my show. Here's a sticker. What other marketing did you do in the early days, or did it just catch fire like that?
Right. So I had that blog, and that blog was fairly popular at the time.
Okay.
I don't know, a couple hundred hits a day, right? So hundreds of articles written on like how to troubleshoot this and that. And so big banner across the top and a banner on the side. Listen to Darknet Diaries. You'll love it. And so that got 7 clicks a day, right? So that was nice to just get this constant flow of 7 new people.
Wait, let me break it down from as an industry analyst hat. That is an SEO play, meaning you were writing how-to articles, how to do X, and people were coming in from Google and then realizing that there was also a show attached to it. Is that accurate?
Well, it's less of that and more of, listen, so one thing I know about other podcasters in the world is that they're creators, and this is probably not the very first thing they've created. They've probably created many things in their life.
Sure.
And you should take your creator journey step by step, right? So my earlier steps was that blog, and it wasn't, making me lots of money or giving me a name in the world, but it was something that I can now springboard off of to get to the next thing, right? So, so my next thing from here, I'm definitely going to use my podcast to promote that, right?
Right.
And so it just keeps, use what you've done before to promote your next thing. And that's just, I think, all of our creator journeys is take your audience with you to the next step.
That's great advice.
The other big thing, of course, that I was doing in the early days was just Twitter like crazy and Instagram like crazy. So, I mean, even Instagram. So I'd had like engagement groups on Instagram where I got like together with like 30 other people. And when we'd post something, and then everyone would like and comment to those posts, right?
Okay.
And then we just supported each other in every single post that there was in each other's groups. But then I got in together with some influencers in the way that I'd pay like $5 or $3 to another person and say, hey, can you post that you're listening to this show? Okay. And so the, accounts with 100,000 followers or more were saying, I'm listening to Darknet Diaries. You should check it out. And this was great. I was like, oh, this is good. So,
and that was $5. That's a $5 ad to reach, 100,000 followers.
Yeah. I mean,
it's
you can pay Instagram or pay Facebook for these ads, but I think it pays another person. You're giving money to another person and not Zuckerberg. And it's interesting because it's already in the feed and it doesn't come off as an ad in that way of like, oh, here's another ad. So it looks more organic. So I think it's more effective and it's cheaper. Oh, it's also cheaper. And it's going in different direction. The money's going in sideways instead of up or down.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it was a fun thing to play around with, and that got me, some new followers. And of course, my theory is that I'm building my audience on Twitter and Instagram specifically, right? So I'm not saying, hey, go to this other platform to listen to my stuff. I'd bring them content. I'd bring them art. I'd bring them stories. I'd bring them interesting things to just read right here. And then maybe 1 out of 10 posts, I'd be like, now go listen to my podcast if you want to hear more, right?
If
so
you
it
want
wasn't
more,
just straight listen. It was, I'm giving you value right on this platform, so you don't have to go anywhere. But if you want even more, then I've got more stuff for you.
That's great advice. I agree wholeheartedly. I have many more questions for Jack. We're going to get to that in a second, but we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, more with Jack Rhysider after this. Hey there, friends. Just wanted to take a moment in the middle of this episode to say, I'm going to say 2 words. I was going to say 1, but I'm going to make it 2. And those words are thank you. Thank you to the supporters of this program on Patreon. Many of you have been with this feed for a gosh darn long time. Years. Centuries even. And I'm so thrilled that you are listening to this, watching this, if you're here on YouTube with me, and that you're checking out the new version of the show. Thank you for the support. It's a lot of work to put this all together, especially now that there's a video component. And so if you find that the new version of the show continues to be valuable to you, or if you are new to the program and you're like, hey, this might fit into my weekly or monthly listening, viewing habits, I hope you'll stick around and perhaps check out the Patreon, which is patreon.com/influencepod. You can just subscribe for free to get email updates about new episodes and behind the scenes, upcoming guests, little clips of the show, and maybe some things that are upcoming. And if you want to get some perks like ad-free episodes, some perks for the Discord community that has been around the program for quite a while, and also there's a tier called executive producers. These are folks who support the show at the $10 or more level. You will get your name or your weird internet handle read by me, because I'm the only one here. You're going to get it read on the show, whether you like it or not. Okay? So I'm here to thank those people at the $10 tier. The executive producers, you know who you are, and I am grateful to you. Deborah Duberpants, James Dozier, Ken M., Shane, Wesley Cordell, Allie, Bowie Barks, Jerry Duran, Jessica Kybell, Kathy Phillips, Matthew Scott, and obviously William. Thank you to those supporters who've been with us and with me for many months, many years. Your support is greatly appreciated. And as you're going to hear on this program, I think many times, depending on the creator and their communities, fan funding direct audience support is the savior of internet creativity. It is the way that creativity and these kinds of programs are able to be sustained on the internet, because advertising, while it's a spoke in the wheel, it is complicated, time consuming, and it can complicate the creation process. So if this program remains valuable to you, I hope you'll check out the Patreon at patreon.com/influencepod. And now it's time to get back to Jack Rhysider. We're back with Influence and Jack Rhysider, host and creator and marketer and art creator, artist, mock-up guy for Darknet Diaries.
Yeah.
Something else I noticed about the way you present yourself online when you talk about your show and things around the show is that you're like, I would call it radically transparent about your stats and your reach and sort of like how much money you spent on like podcast ads and things. And you sort of just put it all out there and be like, here's what I did and it wasn't good. And here I spent all this money and blah, blah, and here's how much it got me, and almost nobody does that in my observation. So why do you do that? And while others kind of keep that stuff a little closer to the chest, what's in it for you?
The early influence there was Pat Flynn, right? So the Smart Passive Income is a podcast that he makes, and he's like, here's how to make income online, right? And then he's like, here's all my numbers. Like, I started this app and that startup and this and that, and he was showing month by month breakdown of how much it costs to market and how much profit and how much it will cost to pay the people. And I was like, wow, this is amazing that you're sharing this. And of course, every guest he had on his show, he's like, tell us all your numbers, right? So it was this wonderful world of sharing numbers that you might keep personal, right? And I don't necessarily share all my financial numbers, but I love sharing the stats because these aren't things that you can easily see. To me, I'm like, hey, if it's what you can already see on YouTube, you can see how many downloads, you can see how many comments, all that kind of stuff, then I think that should be easily shared to just my podcast in general. But these podcasts are the podcast stats aren't seen by the public. They're private in your hosting provider. And so I just take those and I publish them and say, here are the top episodes. Here's how many downloads I got per year. And here are the things that move the needle for the year. And the exciting things that happened. I don't know. I also found just a few startups have done that in the past where they're like, let's do some year-end reviews on all the important things that happened to the company. And there's just been some really inspiring stuff just to see this. And I like being inspiring. I want to be someone who, some knockoff effects here is that I have like a podcasting blog where I say, here's some of the stuff I've been experiencing or whatever. And this just blogging about the podcast industry or just my whole podcast journey, like specific about podcasting, not even about my show, just like stuff about podcasting, has introduced me to so many people in the podcast industry. I mean, people who work at Apple, people who work at Spotify, YouTube has reached out. Like, I have a conversation with the people at YouTube, and it's because I'm putting all this stuff in the world about podcasts, and I'm becoming, sharing all this data that maybe you don't understand or stuff. And like, it's crazy. Just the influential people that follow me simply because they like that I have, that I'm sharing information about podcasting. Yep. So I think it's just come back in spades, everything I've shared, and I recommend everyone share because it's great.
It's another entry point. It's another bucket of audience that's coming to you for different reasons. I love that. Let's talk revenue. Where does it come from? You do host-read ads on the show, so you have sponsors, but they're very specific to your content and such. And I know you're very choosy about that. I presume you are. But then, you're not.
There's a few rules I have about ads, and which is like no CBD oils, no crypto projects, no VPN sponsors. Okay. But other than that, it's kind of I'll take it because there's just too many things to check to say, is this company legit or not? Right. And so I kind of rely on my audience to be like, hey, don't use them as a sponsor anymore. They suck. Okay. And then I've pulled back a couple because of the feedback I've got. Okay. But I used to be very choosy, but not anymore.
Okay. So if you had a pie chart of the revenue, is it mostly Patreon? Is it ads? Like where do you, is it merch? What's the most important thing for keeping the lights on these days?
Yeah. So the main streams are host-read ads, Patreon, and there's merch. And then there's some ads in the YouTube videos. And I think the host-read ads are by far the biggest, probably 70% of the income. Sure. And then Patreon is second biggest.
Are you brokering all those deals directly, or do you work with like agencies or biz dev people to bring the advertisers in? Or is they just sending you an email directly to you?
Yeah, I have an ad management company, and most of the ads come directly to me. So I then send it over to my ad management company, and they negotiate the deal, right? So there's a lot that goes on there. There's like, all right, here's the availability we have to have an ad. Here's what we can offer, a 60-second, he'll read it kind of thing. It'll play for this many downloads, whatever. And then they have to like decide, okay, I'll take that and negotiate a deal on how much it's going to cost for that. And then and then to get the the script, and then give me the script, and I've got to read the script, and then to put it in the right episode where it goes, and then to say, okay, we've completed our end of the deal, pay us now, right? So they do quite a lot of work on getting things set up there. I could do it myself, but I think it's just really nice that they've specialized in that, so I'll let them do it.
Yeah, your time is better focused on telling the stories, I
and
presume.
I think as far as monetizing like that goes, I think it's not really worth the time until you have about 20,000 downloads per episode, because before that, you're probably just making maybe $50 ads in there, and it's not worth going through all those steps of. I mean, even if you just think about a company who wants to advertise to a lot of places, cutting $50 checks, they might spend all day doing that and be like, oh my gosh, this is just like not worth it to me to make all these like entries into a ledger and do all this. So the companies want to work with bigger deals, and you probably think you're worth more than $50, like all the time and energy you spend making the show. It's like, really, for $50 is all I get out of this? Like, I mean, it kind of sounds like a big deal when you have nothing coming in, but when you really just look at the value of your time, it's not even close to what your time is worth. So be respectful of your own time and say, okay, I think I'm worth more than this. I'm going to hold out until somebody actually offers me something that's respectful. And that's where I think 20,000 downloads per episode is, you're starting to get to some respectful ad deals, somewhere like $400, $500 per ad. And of course, the last thing is if you do like the baked in YouTube ads, you know, the ones that just kind of show up and you're like, skip as fast as you can. Those are going to pay a lot less because, and then those happen in podcasts as well. They pay a lot less because you didn't pick it, you didn't make that deal, you didn't read it, you didn't do any of the stuff to get it in there. It just kind of got thrown in. So it's very much like the convenience store version of, well, this candy bar is like 3 times more than if I go to the grocery store and buy it, right? So there's a lot of convenience to those ads, so they pay very little compared to me making the deal of saying, okay, here's what I have to offer, and my voice carries a lot more.
I was going to say, the value to the advertiser is so much more for you to endorse or talk about something, for sure.
So it's like 10 times more money I make from negotiating these deals compared to getting the baked in stuff. So a lot of people are like, oh, I want to add the baked in ads to my show. And I'm just like, you're going to get pennies compared to if you do it this way. And if you're just squeezing your audience to get those pennies out, they might sense that and be like, God, you're only here for like pennies. Like, you're not here for me. You're not here because you're excited. You're just really want those pennies. And it sometimes comes through. So I do encourage other creators to just kind of wait to try to grab. Like, I actually made a blog post once that say, stop trying to get your piece of pie and instead try baking a pie and then giving pieces of pie to other people. Right. And then if you could just start making your own pie, now you've got plenty of pie. But if you're just like trying to grab all the pie, now you've got no pie at the end of the day because you ate all the pie and now there's no pie. So try to make more pie instead of eat more pie.
These are lessons for media companies and publishers too, that we all fell victim to and that we tried to hedge against. But I think it's great advice for creators, large and small.
I think to add to that, one more thing, I just keep thinking of it. I think that at least for podcast creators, we hit 3 major problems when trying to create our thing. The first is making something great, something worthwhile listening to, something people love. The second is making an audience, building enough people to actually listen to it or enjoy it. And then the third is sustaining it or getting money off of it, right? And if you try to put that money part first before you make something great, you're just it's not gonna work well. So you really need to start with, let's make something great. And creators like Mr. Beast and stuff are like, I'm not even gonna help you get better or give you critique until you've already made your first 100 videos. Because we want you to just like go through this process of struggling and building and creating and finding what is great. What did you think was great in these first 100 videos? If you just try to make something great in the first 2-3 videos and you're like, what, I need to be better. It really is a process of just create. And eventually you'll get into your space. And so it just err on the side of create a whole bunch of stuff with a lot of passion. and go from there.
So this leads me to one of my other questions. I recently heard someone on another podcast talk about how like creators can't always scale themselves, meaning everything you're talking about here is like, this is my blood, sweat, and tears. This is me. It's authentic. Everything about this podcast or YouTube video channel or whatever is me and my identity. And then you start doing well. And it's like, well, there's only one of me. I can't scale that authenticity to a team or a company, So I guess my question is like, how, with all the business apparatus or that forms around a successful show, how do you make sure that your voice and your fingerprints are still on all the things without getting like completely burnt out?
Yeah. This is actually something that I've put a lot of focus into recently. Creators like Casey Neistat has just resigned to be like, you know what? Everyone I've tried to work with just slows down my whole process. So I'm just going to be a solo creator from now on. Like I've just given into it. And so he just does 100% of all of it is himself because there's just no one that comes close. But there's people like Mr. Beast, who's like, I want to make mini versions of me and just keep replicating myself and do that. And so he's got a team of, I don't know, dozens of people now that help make his thing. And that allows him to just go for the moon and
I mean, look, with $100 million from Amazon, hopefully he hires more than 12 people. That's my hope for Mr. Beast.
Yeah, but I mean, even when you have all that money, it's very difficult to find somebody who does what you want them to do. And so it is a big struggle. A recent book I was starting to read by Ben Horowitz is talking about how when you start to do this, when you start to get someone else to make your stuff for you, you can see clearly that this show has just been degraded a little bit because there's someone else that's doing it, but you're okay. The trick is being okay with it not degrading too fast.
Yes,
and
a trade-off.
Still being degraded in a way that it's okay enough for you to put your name on it. And you have to be able to accept this level of degradation when you're hiring extra people. And yeah, it's really tricky. And this is something I'm not good at yet. So I want to expand my team, but every time I try, I just end up doing more work than I would have if I did it myself.
Yeah, it's the intern problem. It's the early employee problem of like how much training and handholding am I going to have to do in order to get them up to speed versus like getting the work. All right, this is a two-part question. What is your most popular episode? And what is your favorite episode? And I bet those are not the same. If you could pick a favorite.
What's the most popular? Is it The Spy? No, it's Dirty Comms. So Dirty Comms just hit 1 million downloads in the podcast, on not counting whatever is in YouTube. It's separate stats. But Dirty Comms was really fascinating because it talks about SIM swappers and these kids who are stealing millions of dollars of crypto. And it's a world that I wasn't familiar with. And so I got someone just to kind of give me a tour of this. And it really could just be a story of like, here are 101 ways to make money illegally online. And all 101 things I've never even thought of or heard of before. And I just am so fascinated by it. And I think obviously a lot of other people are fascinated by it too. So it was quite an interesting one. I think to me, one of my favorites is the Xbox Underground one. And that's
one of my favorites too.
When I made it, it was kind of that experience of, okay, this is what I want the show to sound like. If I could make every episode sound like this, I'd be so happy. And it's because I spent time. I spent 9 months on it, maybe a year. Wow. I interviewed people multiple times. I interviewed many people. I got a lot of voices in there. I just did so much extra research and time spent on it to make it shine because I knew I had a good story. So I was like, I want to do my very best possible. And I think it was episode 45. So I was skilled enough to be like, I think I'm good enough to get this one sounding great. And so I really took my time on it. And of course, I can't spend 9 months on every episode. So I can't get, I don't know if that might be the high water mark, of like, here's the best you've ever done. You might not ever get there again because this train just keeps moving and you can't.
But doesn't that bum you out? Does it bum you out? How do you cope with that? Of like, I made the biggest thing I can make and it is all downhill from here. I'm not, that's something we struggle with as creative people.
I like this idea of doing things that aren't scalable sometimes or sustainable, just to say I did it and to be able to look back and say, wasn't that cool when I had the time to do that, right? And I love this because this hard work of like, okay, look how hard that was, gets you a little better. It's like diet and exercise, right? So trying to do that hard thing and then accomplishing it. Well, now the easier stuff isn't so hard, or like it used to be hard. The regular episodes now they're a little bit easier, right? So it improves me just overall. I don't look at it as I'm bummed out. I look at it as, wow, that was a great difficult challenge that I was able to get through, and it improved everything.
We're coming up on time here, but speaking of Xbox, those are great. Those are two of my favorite episodes too. It's a 2-part episode about teenagers who hacked the dev kits of Xboxes in the original Xbox or Xbox 360, and then
the 360.
Was it the 360?
We went all over the place on that episode.
Totally. No spoilers, but like it starts like, hey, we're hacking Xboxes, and it goes very, very south from there. So do check out those episodes. But speaking of video games, I know that you well, let me ask you this. Were video games a gateway to technology for you? Did you like pull apart computers in order to make games run better when you were a kid? Is that a thing?
Sure.
I certainly did.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure. Yeah, you want something fun on a computer to do first, or anything, and video games are fun. And then you're like, oh, okay, let's get another one. And now you're faced with installing and uninstalling and updating and configuring and like, I think there's just a lot that my family didn't understand that I had to take it upon myself on. Okay, well, here's how to get these things running and stuff. So it definitely was a way to get me interested. I think the thing that got me interested as well is just, the first time I went online and I was able to chat with people, and suddenly now I wanted to learn how to type. And I was like, I have a lot to say, but I don't know how to work this keyboard. Gosh. And so I really had to because, my family wanted me to learn to type, but I was like, this is boring. SD, like over and over.
Right.
And so when I finally had something I wanted to say, well, shoot, now I really want to learn. So,
right. What were those games? Were they MMOs? Were they shooters? What
my
caught your attention?
My favorites were definitely the MMOs. So even before MMOs were MUDs, and I think this is where I really got into games. You can imagine
multi-user dungeons for those who might be younger than 45 or whoever.
It's right in the mix between Dungeons and Dragons and like World of Warcraft, right? So Dungeons and Dragons is not a video game. It's let's talk it through. We don't even have like players here. We're just talking. And then there's a video game which has got a lot of graphics and stuff. So in the middle is MUD, where you're typing what it is you're doing. Attack with sword on orc, and then orc says, "I hit you with 3 points of damage." And now
all
you're
text-based. No, there are no graphics, just so listeners understand that. Yeah.
So to me, this was this amazing world. I don't have to keep track of dice and math and all this kind of stuff. I could just go into dungeons and attack, and so that's where I think I really had a great time. So that got me into, well, I want to program my own world, and I want to design my own map, and I want to create this extra equipment and all this kind of stuff. So I became a developer, and this is where I learned C programming. And it was because of the video games that I wanted to learn C.
I had a hunch, and I knew that was the gateway drug. As we wrap up, what are you playing these days if you still have time for video games?
Elden Ring. I think I got into it a year after it came out, or almost. And I like to wait till games have shown that they're sticking around. I don't like to get into the hype. And that one looked like it was going to stick around for a while, and it was great.
Yep. Did you finish it? Did you really go all the way through? Yeah,
a few times.
Oh wow, okay. DLC's coming. I did the same as you. I waited for a sale, waited a year later, really loved what I saw and appreciated this amazing thing. but had to bounce off because
it's consuming.
too hard, too consuming.
Well, so after I finished it, I was like, I don't understand what I just did, honestly. Like, am I on the good side or the bad side? I don't even know what is this world? What am I doing? So I started relearning the lore. And so if it took me 200 hours to finish the game, I actually probably spent 200 more hours just reading lore and watching videos on like fan theories. And I started trying to solve puzzles on like, well, we never figured out who this person was. Okay. I think I've got some theories and stuff. And I started like writing out fan theories. And that's where I realized, wow, you're getting way too obsessed. Why don't you try learning about galaxies and the cosmos and sort out the mysteries of the universe instead of like mysteries of some
fan theories, lore, getting enveloped in someone else's art and world building is the greatest thing you can spend your time on, in my opinion.
No, because I think it's pointless. Let's say I came up with the perfect fan theory and then it was like, okay, well, no one's going to believe me. No one's going to say, oh, that does work. You got it, because it's not canon, right? The creator would have to say, yeah, you got it right.
Yeah, but you're looking for an objective truth, whereas like, there are people who have built entire careers studying Tolkien, and analyzing it, and it's like he's not around to say whether this elf was really here, but we can still teach it in college. I don't, make money.
Well, I think personally, I'd just rather try to do something more effective with my life or with like just solve some math problems, like if I'm spending this much time and energy, do something that's actually going to be meaningful to me, because 2 years from now I'm going to forget everything about this and it's going to be pointless.
Fair enough, but having fun is never pointless. So for all you Elden Ring fans out there, keep trucking. Speaking of doing something important with your life, anything big on the horizon? Any big episodes you want to tease or projects or?
Well, going from that thread of like, what am I doing spending this time trying to write fan theories? I did switch over to studying philosophy more and just personal journey and trying to build up my emotional intelligence and just doing more exercise and stuff like this. So really, really rediscovering who I am and sorting out my philosophies. I think kind of COVID as well as one of these things of like, man, everything I thought I knew is not quite working out. Maybe I should revisit some of my first principles or whatever the case is, and like, is this still valid, or did some more information come out that I should be changing things, right? And so I've just kind of revisited. I really emptied out my whole head of like all my theories and thoughts and personal beliefs and stuff, and dumped it on the table and sorted it out and starting to put it back in. So as I'm doing this, I really want to get well versed with being able to verbally talk about my personal ideas and philosophies. But when I actually do talk about it with people, it just comes out all blah, blah, blah. I can't say it. And so if my podcast got me to be able to talk about cyber security in an intelligent way, then I am highly considering talking about like my personal philosophies in an intelligent way. If I can get there, I would love to be able to level up in my own personal understanding of the world, to be able to speak clearly, because I really admire and am envious of people who are just poetic about life.
But that's a skill. That's a learned skill.
Right.
There are some geniuses out there, but I think you're right that like you have to work at it and build it and consolidate it into a form. So do you envision that being like a separate podcast or a separate video series, or would it be part of Darknet?
Yeah, I've started working on that podcast. Cool. I don't know if it's ever going to see the light of day, but there's some recordings already been made.
Very nice. All right. We're going to keep our ears open for Jack's philosophy podcast. I will certainly be subscribing. Jack Rhysider, thank you so much for being a guest on Influence. This was lovely.
Thanks for having me. I loved it.
Thank you, listeners, for listening to Influence. The show is supported on Patreon, and I could not make it without you. So if this podcast is valuable to you, as Jack said, someone slapping $20 into his hand at a conference, consider a contribution at a level that's right for you. And if you'd like to get an ad-free version of the show, Discord perks, we're figuring all this stuff out, or even have your name thanked on the show, as you heard earlier, head over to patreon.com/influencepod. And if you're listening to the audio version of this, we have a video version as well. But even if you're like an audio-only listener, if you don't mind hopping over to the YouTube channel just to leave a subscribe, we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so that we can partner up on YouTube and get that going. So that is youtube.com/influencepodcast. You can also join our Discord server, discord.gg/influencepod, where you can chat with me, perhaps some guests. I will tee up future guests, and you can ask them your questions and get that read on the show. And you can leave a voicemail. I love hearing from you, 347-871-6548. And you can also send an email if you have, well, I'll say this. When I announced this show, I posted it and shared it. And so many of you I said, hey, who do you listen to? Who do you love? You should share your favorite influencers with me. And I have a list of like 45 different people now who I have no idea what they do, but I'm clicking through their TikToks and I'm like, oh my gosh, these are hilarious geniuses, amazing people in spaces that I'm not familiar with. So keep those recommendations coming. Discord, Patreon, and also this new email address, which was very hard to get, influencepod69.
Noise!
That is influencepod69.
Noise!
at gmail.com. And you can always find me on Twitter or Instagram at Matt_Silverman. All these links are in the show notes and in the YouTube description, so don't pull the car over. They're there. You can click on them later, okay? Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk at you next week.